Okay, thank you, Jessica. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We've taken a couple of minutes to get settled. And again, this is a lengthy time to be on virtually with each other. We'll have an opportunity to have a break, but again, please feel free to do what you need to during our time together. If you need to be off camera, if you need to, get up and stretch, if you need to step away for a minute, just please feel free to ensure that you're taking care of yourselves. Next slide, please. So we have quite a few people here today with us who are not typically with us. And so we have quite a few guests. So again, want to say welcome, welcome, and we are happy to have you. It's nice to see this nice, huge round number today. So welcome in. Just wanted to go over a couple of participation pieces with you. So if we have any polls or any voting happening today, that is polls are only open to and voting is only open to HVAC members. We will have kind of a public portion of the meeting. So that will be where you can ask your questions or make some comments. So we'd ask that you hold off until those sections of the meeting. And then if you have any technical difficulties, please feel free to reach out to Jessica or myself. When we put the PowerPoint together, we thought Soraya would be with us, but she is off supporting a different meeting. So please, again, if you're having any troubles hearing, anything happens, please feel free to reach out, private message to Jessica or myself. Next slide, please. So take a moment right now in the chat just to put your name, organization, and role. And also, if you could make a change to your name so that you either have a DCYF staff or TRIO member, you have HVAC guest, you have guest under your name, or you have member for HVAC member. So just take a moment or two to get that done. And then just say hi to everybody in the chat really quickly and really briefly. So we'll just pause here a little bit to give people time to do that, because I know I have to make that change myself. I'm noticing that there are those changes happening here, and some people are also, again, if you need help with that, please feel free to send me a message or send Jessica a message and we can help support you with that. I'm still seeing people working on that, which is great. All right. Jessica, could we move on to the next slide, please? All right, so we're going to have a brief time for us to kind of spend a little bit of time getting ourselves prepared, transitioning from whatever you were doing before into this space. So I'm going to break our community kind of building piece into two sections. So we'll do this first one here, and hopefully we'll have some time. We'll have some time to connect towards the tail end of our meeting as well. So this one's going to be a pretty quick one, but I think it'll be fun. So I want you to find an item in your space. If you're at the office, in your office space, if you're at home, in whatever space it is that you're using right now, find an item for each letter of your first name. So you're going to look around and see what you can find that represents each letter of your first name. So any item in the space that you're in. And be super creative. You can also create something if you can't find something for a letter in your name. So you feel free to turn off your camera or do whatever it is you need. So find an item. And And let's see. Why don't we do that in 4 minutes? Let's see how creative you can be in 4 minutes. All right, so it is 9:09 right now. So we'll come back together at 9:13. Okay. Sorry, Jamie, I just saw your message. Find an item in your workspace right now that represents a letter in your name. So one item, or it could be 2 items or the one item for both letters. So each letter, find an item that represents that for your first name. Hopefully this gives you enough time to look. Sorry. Got about a minute left. It is 9:13. Hopefully that was enough time for you to look around. I'm wondering if there might be a couple of brave individuals who want to share what they found. And also feel free to share in the chat. So anybody willing to share out loud? Oh, Memory. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everybody. So I found my mouse for the M in my name, and I found envelopes. Those are my trusty. So my first 2 letters of my name, but that's as far as I could get.
Thank you for sharing, Memory. I appreciate that. I don't even have envelopes. I was just thinking that as you mentioned that. I'm like, I don't even have envelopes anymore. That's space. Matthew, that's right. Long names are hard. Long names are hard to do it, but you made it work. Anybody else want to share out loud?
I can share. So I found a vase. I have a vase here. And then my aesthetic, I have little decorations. And then my notebook, electronics. And then I had scissors. And what was the other item I had? Oh, stickers. I have stickers. And then again, a different aesthetic item.
I love it. Thank you, Vanessa. And I didn't even think about notebook for the N in my name. I wandered around for a long time trying to think of, and what? And I found a Scrabble letter. So I was like, but notebook would have been perfect because I have one sitting right here, but it never crossed my mind.
It took me a while. That was the last letter.
Thank you all. I'm seeing them populate the chat as well. Just offer one. Is there anybody else who'd like to share out loud before we transition? And keep them coming in the chat as well, please. Okay. Well, thank you so much for engaging in that, and we'll transition. And again, please keep them coming in the chat. So hopefully we're all able to get the agenda. So this is just a review of the agenda. We'll spend some time this morning doing a data review and discussion. We'll have a legislative update, and then we have a variety of different updates there. Our chair, co-chair update. We have some budget updates as well for state and federal, and then we have some general DCYF updates. We'll also have an opportunity in there to take a break. Next slide, please. So we're going to transition now to our HVSA data review. And before I hand this over to our lovely partners at Department of Health, just wanted to give a little bit of an overview, because we are going to spend some time really diving into some enrollment data. And enrollment, we've identified as an intentional area of focus for the next year plus. And that has really been driven by where we are kind of statewide and federally. And there's been really a focus on our enrollment. There have been some questions that have been asked from our federal partners about where we are and ways that we can look at improving our target, getting to our benchmark, which is 85% enrolled. There's also been some questions from our legislative partners here within the state asking about kind of enrollment, and I've shared an interest in that. And we know that that's an identified area that we need to focus on more intentionally and need to make some improvement. So that really is of what we're going to look at and focus on today, so that we can identify where we are. Also so we can talk through and see the story behind what the data is showing us. So this is an opportunity for us to look at data over the last state fiscal year and just look at what the data shows us, and then really talk through the story behind the data. So with that, I will pass this on to Martha and Ashley, I believe.
Good morning. Can we go back a minute? I just wanted hi, this is Martha Skiles. Apologies for my hesitation here. I'm hoping that Ashley is on because she was going to present this morning. Ashley, are you on? I am not hearing her, so I will go ahead and start. And apologies, I didn't prep for this, but I'm familiar with the slide. So let's just go ahead and get going.
Martha?
And hopefully Ashley will be able to join us. She may be having computer issues.
Martha,
yes.
Would it work to skip this and come back to it?
If that is okay, that would be great. Because I know she had some things around the enrollment, and I can reach out to her and see if she can join us a little bit later.
Okay. Then why don't we rework? Not a problem, Martha. No, why don't we rework it? So let's, that would put you on next, Erica, if you are ready to go. Sorry for that quick transition, but I know you are here.
Thank you. And Eric, if it doesn't work, I can jump back in.
It's not Erica.
Yep, I'm here.
Perfect. Okay, Jessica, could you advance? Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Perfect. Thanks, Erica.
Yeah, no problem. Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm Erica Halleck. I don't think I know everybody here, but nice to meet those I don't know. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy for Start Early Washington, and I get the pleasure of working on a variety of early learning items with the legislature and the governor's office and DCYF, including home visiting. So excited to talk with you a little bit about that this morning. Thought I'd start off with a really pretty picture that I grabbed about a week ago on the campus. We had just gorgeous cherry blossoms. We got to take what we can get these days, right? And the campus had these gorgeous cherry blossoms, and then they started dropping, and it looked like kind of snow on the ground, and then they're all gone. So anyway, I caught this picture probably 10 days ago or so. But before I jump into some of the home visiting specific items, I think it's really important to give a broader context of what's going on with the state budget because it's completely relates. So I really encourage you to ask questions because this is a very complicated and complex budget situation this year. For the first time in many years, we're in a budget reduction phase. And for many folks that are newer to this space, we've been in a growth space for years. And even when, for example, in COVID, when we were concerned about cuts, the feds came in with significant money to help buttress our uncertain times at the state level. And we're not expecting that this time. So next slide, please. So just getting to the bottom line up front, we face a significant budget gap. We are required, I think we're the only state, if not one of the few states that require a 4-year balanced budget, meaning it makes our budget writers' job harder. We have a biennial budget, meaning they budget for 2 years. So they have to ensure that what they plan for balances out for 2 biennia or 4 years. So all we need to get from that is it makes their job harder and they can't, or they have to minimize their budget gimmicks that they do. And there's some budget gimmicks under play as well. So based on the last revenue forecast that was done in March, we are facing about a $16 billion budget gap. And just as a point of reference, our biennial budget is about just under $80 billion. So this $16 billion budget gap is quite significant. Compounding that, everyone expects, including our state economists, that our next revenue forecast, which is in June, to be grim with the potential for tariffs, other federal actions, and just anytime there's economic uncertainty, that is not good for our revenue forecasts. Our legislature's responsibility, their constitutional responsibility, is to pass a balanced budget based on the latest revenue forecast, which was in March. If they do not pass a budget and they are in town when the June forecast comes out, their job will be exponentially harder. I am characterizing their work as twin tsunamis. I see our state's budget gap as the initial tsunami that is facing them. And then I see the federal uncertainty as a second tsunami. And the philosophy of our state legislative leadership is to get our house in order. And their goal is to finish up by the April 27th scheduled sine die, which is the Latin term for without day, which is our technical legislative adjournment. So they're wanting to basically balance a budget, get out of here so that if they need to come back potentially in the fall, which is what could happen, to respond to potential federal actions, which again, we do not know what could happen. We have, indications of what could be happening from the federal level, but right now we don't know. Next slide, please. So how is the legislature responding to the budget gap and the governor? And again, of course, we have a new governor, as we all know. So earlier in the process, Governor Ferguson directed our state agencies to prepare what amounted to about 6% budget cuts, as well as some management cuts of staff. DCYF, of course, was one of the agencies that did that. And DCYF did not include home visiting in that cut exercise. All state agencies went through that, except for K-12 was exempted, as was law enforcement related agencies, and higher education was limited to 3%, if memory holds. And Governor Ferguson proposed some cuts to the legislature. The legislature considered those cuts. They were very clear that the legislative leadership, the budget writers were very clear that an all cuts budget was not tenable for them, that an all cuts budget with this level of a budget gap would not go, would be counter to their values. It would be too harmful for vulnerable Washingtonians. So they were evaluating new revenue, and probably about a month ago now, the Senate and the House both released various revenue proposals. Next slide, please. And then on March 24th, concurrently, the Senate and the House released their own individual budget proposals, which I'll talk about here in a minute. And a little bit differently, the Senate, our state Senate had a lot of change. Both the Senate and the House had a lot of change in the last election. The Senate, which used to be probably more small c conservative than the House, is a little more progressive than the House right now. And the Senate proposed more revenue and proposed more spending than the House, as evidenced here. So the Senate proposed $78.5 billion in spending, while this House proposed 77.8. Importantly, both bodies proposed what they're calling a FIT tax, which is a financial intangibles tax, otherwise known as a wealth tax. So as we all know, we do not have an income tax in our state. And there was a proposal to have a wealth tax instituted, as well as the House was proposing what they're calling a payroll tax on based off of Seattle's Jumpstart tax. So those were in kind of the mix early on. I say early on, it wasn't that long ago, but it may have been. We're on day 95 right now, but March 24th feels like, eons ago. Next slide, please. On April 1st, which was April Fool's Day, possibly a little ironically, Governor Ferguson held a press conference where he put the kibosh on the wealth tax. He said, I will not sign the wealth tax. I do not think it is defensible. I do not think it is legal. So no go on the wealth tax. Also, legislature, you guys put in too much new spending. So he gave kind of a report card on how the Senate and the House were approaching the budgets so far. So he took the wealth tax off the table, which, as noted here, the Senate had their $4.2 billion assumed from the wealth tax, and the House had 2.4. So that means less revenue available. So that means more cuts. So that's the takeaway here, right? So it's like, okay, what was in the Senate and the House budgets became kind of the high water mark. And if that wealth tax is off the table, we've got more cuts possible. And he's saying, you guys are spending too much money. So again, more cuts possible. And that was on April 1st. Next slide, please. So what are the next steps? Just this week, so this is a little bit of breaking news since I prepared these slides, the Senate and the House released a revised revenue package that they appear to be in agreement on. And there are 5 components to that. The Senate held their hearings, their public hearings on those proposals last night. The House is doing that in the morning. Those proposals will bring in an estimated $12 billion. So again, if you'll remember, I said originally there's about a $16 billion gap. These proposals total about 12. So that would mean about $4 billion in cuts. I would expect that in the end, they're not going to raise the full 12 billion, because last night at these public hearings, you saw interested parties go up and request to be cut out. So for example, let me go through what the proposals were. Number one, there is a proposal to raise property tax, which will impact homeowners, and that will benefit K-12 education. We're going to hear a lot about that. That is going to be very controversial. I do believe that will be approved. Secondly, there is a proposal to increase capital gains and the estate tax to benefit the Education Legacy Trust account. You might remember back in 2021, the capital gains tax was initiated, and that benefited the Education Legacy Trust account, including the Fair Start for Kids Act. Remember that, because that's going to come up here in a little bit, talking about home visiting. Okay. Third, there is a plan to eliminate some tax exemptions that are in play. So for example, there's like a tax exemption for gold bullion, which is not a soup, apparently. I don't know what it's. There's a lot of tax exemptions that are in play right now, and there's a proposal to eliminate those. So I'm just picking on gold bullion, which apparently I know nothing about. So the gold bullion industry, whomever they are, they're trying to continue their exemption, for example. There is fourth, a proposal to extend certain sales tax to other services. So right now, if you go get a massage, or there's other services, so they're trying to extend it to like various IT services or accounting services. So again, last night during the hearing, you saw people representing those type of industries saying, I don't think you meant to tax our industry. We're very vital and important, so you need to exempt us. So that was kind of the pattern that what went on last night. And then I am forgetting the fifth, sales tax. Other types of taxing, like nicotine products. Oh, and there's another proposal, which is a bit of a gimmick, where they're going to say, okay, big business that has a certain amount of collections, you're going to pay your sales tax in June of 2027 instead of July of 2027. So we can capture that money in the 25-27 biennium instead of the 27-29 biennium. Not sure if that's legal. They're figuring that out. At any rate, this is all to raise $12 billion. I don't think at the end of the day, it'll stick at $12 billion, because some of those folks, like the traveling nurse groups, and someone's going to be successful in getting themselves exempted. Like, for example, I heard that in the nicotine area, they accidentally taxed like patches, the FDA approved like tobacco cessation things. So I think those will get exempted. So things like that. At any rate, so that is in play tomorrow morning, and that vote is happening. But the end result that I think is important is, from what we saw from the Senate and the House budgets, we're going to see more cuts. We're going to see more cuts because they don't have the wealth tax to bolster that money. So before I get to home visiting, and they have to do all this by next Sunday, the 27th. So we have 10 days, which is a lot. And there's a little bit of friction going on amongst intra-party and inter-party, because that always makes it more fun. So before I get to home visiting, are there any general questions that I can answer about the state of play? I think the bottom line I want to share is this budget gap is big, it is real, and it does impact our programs because there's just less money to fund things. And they're faced with really challenging decisions. So some of the other, I just want to also emphasize, some of the other decisions on the table are things like reducing postpartum coverage for Medicaid from 12 months to 6 months. They are proposing cutting access to food banks. There's furloughs for state employees. So our team that we're working with here at DCYF are reductions in pay. So there are a lot of untenable decisions on the table that no one is happy with. They're doing them against their values. So I just want to make that clear as well. So any general questions before I get to home visiting? Hi, Gretchen.
I say this, I mean, I know that like it's a big gap.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that stood out for me, and I don't know if I misread it or totally interpreted it right, but when I looked at the Senate budget, it just seemed to really go after children and families. Like it just seemed like that was, I mean, and maybe I just didn't see it all. It just seemed like those were some of the biggest areas facing cuts. Did they say anything about that? Like, I just am,
Yeah.
in my mind, I'm like, there's gotta be some other places as well, because it just, I don't know. And sometimes I feel like people are trying to make a statement like, okay, you're telling us we have to do these cuts. We're gonna, like they just want to make it clear of the impact.
So great. I think you're referring probably to the Fair Start for Kids Act, probably largely. So they are achieving $1 billion, roughly so far, $1 billion in savings related to the Fair Start for Kids Act. So there were, and the legislature would say they're not cuts, it's cost avoidance, which is a distinction. So there were, as the Fair Start for Kids Act passed in 2021, there were a number of steps and stages that were slated to go online in this next biennium. So for example, there was slated to be income increases for Working Connections childcare. ECAP entitlement was supposed to come online, as well as some rate increases for providers. Now, family childcare is part of SEIU. They do collective bargaining. They are slated to achieve those because of that collective bargaining agreement. So the legislature would argue Fair Start for Kids Act was so successful that it blew through all the estimates. So it basically, the state can't afford Fair Start for Kids Act because it was so incredibly successful. So it had to be delayed, but that people are not being cut. It's just, it is cost avoidance because it shows up on paper as a cut, but it is cost avoidance because they are not putting things into effect. So transition to kindergarten, they are pausing transition to kindergarten. Again, something that has been wildly, wildly successful. So they are pausing it at this year's level rather than expanding it like it was expected to be. So it shows up on paper as a cut, but it's not a cut because it was forecasted to grow and it just won't grow. So it is a cut in like the postpartum Medicaid going from 12 months to 6 months. That is a cut. So there are some cuts, definitely. And they were done. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of places, especially when you take K-12 off the table and corrections and largely higher ed. There are just not a lot of places to make cuts. And early learning sat out there, unfortunately.
Yeah. Just seems like we can't ever really get them to ever think about like upstream, I mean, but I don't really.
It wasn't done. It wasn't done. It was done. Yeah. It wasn't done within, it was, yeah. Martha, sorry.
Yeah, just a quick question, clarification on the postpartum coverage, limiting it to 6 months. Was that in both proposed budgets, both the Senate and the House? And does that mean it's a done deal soon?
It was only, so it's a House bill. So what they do at this stage is each budget only funds their own bills. So it's not technically a done deal. It's in the bill's in the Senate right now, but I would say it's likely. So what happens is your bill gets funded in your budget and the other house doesn't fund the budget. doesn't fund it in their budget rather, but I would say it's likely. And it is not it is necessary to implement the budget, so the bill is not subject to the timelines. Other questions about generally, and then we can go into home visiting. All right, next slide, please. So I want to talk about some of the philosophy of the budget writers. So our budget writers on the Senate side were June Robinson from Everett and Derek Stanford from Bothell. So Senator Stanford is new to the budget writing team. And then on the House side, Tim Ormsby from Spokane, who's been around doing it forever, and Nicole Macri from the Seattle area, and Mia Gregerson also from Seattle area. So they very early on explained their philosophies, and their primary priority was not, their last resort was impacting direct services to people that were currently receiving them. So their goal was to not, again, they were looking for areas to achieve efficiencies, and they were very clear, and this relates to this slide, underspends. So they are really combing underspends all throughout the budget. And this will be a theme, I think, going forward for a while. So they're looking at where can we take money that isn't being spent so that we can save, you know, postpartum or food banks or others, because they really were clear they did not want to cut services going out to people. So they had this philosophy that they've talked about, and they talked about it consistently throughout the budgeting process. So as it comes to home visiting, the House and the Senate took very different approaches. And I also will note that I sat down with both the Senate and the House budget staff just this week, because I want to make sure I understood the budgets, and I was able to ask questions. So, so for the 25-27 budgets, both the Senate and House sweep the underspends. The House sweeps 1.5 million one time. The Senate sweeps 2.5 million on an ongoing basis. Now, a couple questions come to mind. You might say, well, why is the House sweeping at one time and the Senate ongoing? So that'd be the first question. The second question you would ask is, why is it a different amount? Which is also a fair question. So the Senate says the ongoing is based on spending patterns. So basically saying we've seen a trend of a level of underspend that would signal this underspend is pattern, and therefore would be an underspend that we could sweep on an ongoing basis. Why are the amounts different? The legislature does have access through their systems to the spending. It's kind of like, you know, you go into your computer, if you have a partner where you share an account or a family member, they can look in and see what the actuals are. So it probably relates to when they looked at what the underspends were when they booked it in the budget. So it was probably different time, and the underspend was sitting differently when that was done. So that's why it's a different amount. And I would expect when the final budget comes out, it will reflect the more up-to-date number. So that's a little bit about the underspend. Next slide, please. So there were additional, and these reductions are ongoing. So the House, and you'll see the amounts are very different. So the House proposes rather a $500,000 biennial reduction. So just $250,000 a year. I will note when DCYF did its webinar that some of you may have joined by Government Affairs, that said there was no impact. That wasn't accurate. So just flagging that for folks. The House, the Senate. So the Senate proposed an $8.056 million biennial reduction. So that is a significantly higher amount of money. So that would be just over $4 million a year. And remember, I mentioned the Fair Start for Kids Act and how the Senate did a lot of sweeps of Fair Start money. So this money originated from the Fair Start for Kids Act in 2021. And DCYF reported at its webinar that this impacts over 400 currently contracted slots. In talking with the Senate staff, they're, again, going back to the philosophy around service reduction, they see that there's sufficient funding out of the spending patterns to be able to ensure that there's sufficient funding to not lead to service reduction. Next slide, please. And this is just framed in a different way. We just put it here in a different slide so you can see the comparison. And the next slide. So what's next? So Senate and the House budget negotiators, what they're doing now is they're working through all of their differences. It goes to what's called a conference committee, and they'll put out a final budget that gets voted up or down, and we're all on the outside of these closed doors. It likely will come out, I think they have a deal, or they'll have a deal soon. It will likely come out on August 26th because they're scheduled to adjourn on the 27th. And we'll see it then. The next slide is, I think, okay, so this was what was in the House agency detail. This just reflects what I said. The next slide is the Senate, and Liv put the slides in here if you want them. And then finally, this is in the budget bill. I wanted to explain this one real quickly. The next slide. So this, in the budget bill a couple of years ago, when this money was secured to help with rates and $1 million for expansion, the effect of this strikeout, it's not that the money is lost, it's just saying to DCYF, you can do whatever you want with the money. It's not provisoed. Basically, it's saying it's not directing DCYF to use that money for expansion. So it's less directive. That was a lot. And I know I'm really in the weeds on this stuff, so I'm happy to answer questions. And I'm looking here at my notes to see what I might have missed there. Yeah, so again, I just want to say they're going to get budget writers. They'll give a number. They'll say, okay, we need to achieve this amount of savings for this issue area, and they'll have to come up with it. So, meaning like for early learning, they'll need to have $20 million or whatever, and they'll figure out how to get there. And I'm happy to answer questions because I know that was a lot.
Hi, Erica. This is Adrian. Thank you so much for sharing this. My question is more around, I know that they are now in the process of decision. Is there anything that this advisory committee can do at this point? Or there is no room anymore, is it too late?
Well, I mean, the challenge, Adrian, is, how do I say this? The challenge is it's the challenges with the money, the money is at the agency. So the challenge is the money at the agency. And the challenge is then if you're a budget writer and you're balancing housing and shelter and food and you're going to, it's hard. I mean, I definitely tried.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Marilyn.
Thanks, Erica. I wondered if could you explain again about when you said it probably impacts 400 slots? I think I understood what you were implying, but that we would lose 400 slots, or they're assuming that those are 400 slots we haven't been filling.
And I would look to DCYF to correct, but I believe that what they were saying was right now, those dollars are directly used to contract. And what the legislative staff was saying was there's enough uncontracted money that is already allocated to the agency that can backfill it. I might not have said it precisely, but they were saying like there is enough unallocated money to backfill it. So that should not lead to service loss. The Senate is saying there's sufficient money to continue to serve all families.
Okay.
And Erica, our agency has provided guidance to the legislature, as far as I know, that the reductions will be a loss in 400 slots at least, if the Senate reduction happens, not that it can be backfilled, that it will be a loss.
I think that I think they would say that there's sufficient funding in other areas that hasn't been expended.
And you're saying they, as in the legislature?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Gretchen, please go ahead.
Thanks, Erica, for that. It was very helpful. I am wondering, could you clarify that you mentioned that I think it's 1.77 that they said could be used however, didn't have to be used for. So are they are they saying that could be used to fill in some of the gap that will be lost, like, I mean, if there's an $8 million cut, they're saying, but you can use this 1.7 now. However, am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're just saying we're not going to be so prescriptive. Basically, they're giving DCYF more authority over their bucket of money.
Okay, thanks.
They're removing the proviso, essentially.
Okay, thank you.
And I think too, when the time they wrote it, the expansion wasn't out. So they could have taken the money. So it's better that they didn't take the money. I thought they were going to take the money. They didn't take the money. So they let them keep the money and they said, you can do with it what you want. Effectively, that's what they did.
Are there any other questions from HVAC members?
I have a question, Erica. On the slide that has the budget comparison between the House and the Senate, I feel like that really depicts quite clearly that the scenarios proposed one is way more significant in terms of long-term impact than the other. The Senate is much more like an 8 million biennium cut and also a long-term swipe of the underspur, not just one time. How do you make sense of that? Like, just such a huge difference in approach between the House and the Senate.
Well, I would just say general. So I go back to the philosophy of the bodies. So I would say generally they're looking at the Senate in particular has been working really hard to look at protecting, well, they both have, but protecting service delivery. So they were looking at dollars, any dollar that isn't being spent so that they could protect service delivery in the health and human services space broadly. So they have been scouring where dollars aren't spent, and they would argue these are not actively being spent and could then be used to apply to other vulnerable populations. I'm just sharing the message. I'm not saying I'm agreeing with this. I'm just saying, yeah.
Adrian, you had a question?
I think I got the answer, and it was more about, if we have all these cut, no matter what, Senate or House, we will be able to continue the services as they are right now. Right? No. Okay, there's something that I'm missing there.
There is something being missed.
Yeah. And can you give me more details on this? Because I know that the rates you won't be able to do it. But if we're saying that it's the underspend that we had, so we will need to go in cost and reduction of the slots that we have in the next coming years. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I'll jump in. I will say, Erica, I'm hoping maybe we can follow up after the meeting too. And we don't have anyone from our Office of Government Affairs on today either. But just in my conversations yesterday with our budget folks, it would really be effectively like a $5 million reduction for us in what we have currently budgeted. So I'm kind of trying to understand as well. I said many questions over the last few weeks, haven't gotten answers to all of them, but we are seeing programmatically, and I think I confirmed this yesterday with budget, that the Senate budget specifically reduces what we would be getting into the account, not including the recent expansions, by $5 million. So it's like a 40% cut in our current budget. That's not including the expansion. So Erica, I'm not sure where the Senate and the House or which one is making the assumption that even with the reductions, there is money to continue the work. I'm not sure about that. That's not what I have heard internally. We're being told to plan for reductions, fairly significant ones. So anyway, so that I'm not sure where the message is being lost there, or what I'm not understanding, or what maybe other folks internally at DCOF understand that I don't. So we have some follow-up to do. And in fact, part of our conversation today is to get advisement from you all as Home Visit Advisory Committee members of what should we be considering as we plan for reduction in service. So
I would ask this, Laura, what do you expect at the end of this fiscal year? What do you expect? How much do you expect to spend? I mean, that's the question. If you, I believe, because I got $73 million was the allocation for 23-25.
mm-hmm.
And the Senate's hypothesis is this loss can be absorbed. So you can absorb $10.5 million less. So
yeah, not
I would
accurate.
get that to
Yeah.
them ASAP with the data to back it up that you're going to spend more than 62.5 million.
Well, and part of it is that, yeah. So I can, Erica, thank you for that. And maybe, like I said, we can connect after this, so I can make sure I know what I need to follow up with our finance folks, because the authority that we have, for example, federal authority, well exceeds the money that we actually have available to us. And the same for some of the state, because we have so many different funding streams. So that's part of the challenge, is it appears as if we have, because you're right, the federal authority is like 36 million and the state authority is about 35 million. So what the legislature has told us is that we can be allowed to spend that money, but the reality is that money doesn't actually exist. We don't have that money in grants and those kinds of things. So
I know I've heard you talk about that for a while. Are you planning to do a decision package to resolve that? Because until that gets done,
I have asked for that, yes. and those are I don't know where that lives in other parts of the agency. So yes, that has been floated before. I'm not sure if it is gone anywhere. So I will follow up on that too,
Okay.
to rectify our authority that we have to match what we actually. So for example, Erica, we have $2.6 million of federal authority for Family First Prevention Services Act
Yeah.
that appears in our budget. There's no money. So
No, I know that. No, I'm aware of
yeah,
that. I just,
yeah.
until it's incumbent upon the agency, when the agency has to
Yeah.
request that via the DP, or the governor's office the governor has to put it in their budget. But I think the key question is for you all to show, we're gonna spend 73 or whatever it is, I think it's 73 minus 10.5. So we're gonna lose service because we're gonna spend this much
Yeah.
money.
Okay. Thank you for that. I will, like I said, I'm been working on this week as information has come to me that I hadn't had before. And so this is something that I'll follow up again on after the meeting.
Okay,
as
sounds
well.
good.
Thanks, Erica. And thank you for the presentation.
Are there any questions from our guests? Erica, thank you so much. Very detailed, very thorough. A lot of information to take in, but a lot of information we needed to hear and know and be aware of. So really appreciative of that. So we are going to back now to our presentation from DOH. So we're going to go back. I think Ashley is on.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to stay off camera because I'm deep in the allergy battle and it's not pretty. But I'm happy to be here with you today. I'm going to go over just some different data points and share kind of some information about home visiting over the past year. I'm not sure who's running the slides, if I have it, or if we can go to the next one. Thank you. Okay, here's just a quick kind of at a glance from state fiscal year 24. So this shows that we served 32, almost 3,300 families, 3,400 children, conducted 51,000 home visits, about 15,000 encounters. This also shows kind of the percentage of families experiencing poverty at or below 100% FPL. The number for kind of higher percentages of FPL is much higher. We also had 69% of caregivers from racial groups recognized as being disproportionately impacted by adverse outcomes, and 85% of children under the age of 3. We could go to the next slide. We're going to go over our aligned measures and information on our aligned measures over the past year. So just a reminder of kind of what those are. These are measures that we look at for all of our sites. So it's a subset of what are the kind of larger number of MCV measures that are done for programs that are also do not receive MCV. So these are the consistent measures across all programs. And they touch on 4 domains: improved maternal and newborn health, reducing childhood injuries, abuse, and neglect, improving school readiness, and reducing crime or DV. So you can see kind of what falls into those domains there. And we'll go to the next slide and show how we're doing. What you can see here is that each of the different domains, so for breastfeeding, these are the measures that fall in those domains. We have breastfeeding, well-child visits, depression screenings, observing parent-child interaction, CPS interaction, early language and literacy, which are kind of like reading and literacy activities, developmental screening, and IPV screening. And what we see here is an improvement in all of these from SFY 23 to SFY 24. This also shows what we use in a lot of different things to kind of see how we're doing is our MCV threshold. So MCV kind of averages some different things across the country and sets a threshold every few years. And the most recent one is the federal fiscal year 23. So we're kind of comparing all of those things to federal fiscal year 23. And I think that we talked about this the previous year, but the thing that comes up for McPhee is demonstration of improvement, which means we're either above the red line in this one, the horizontal line that comes across the screen. And on each of these bars, we're either above that or we're making steps progressing improvement towards that bar. So those are kind of the criteria that McPhee monitors us on. And we did do that kind of each of the areas last year. For CPS interaction, what that shows is we actually want to be kind of it's a different reversed kind of way of looking at that. We are doing better than kind of the McPhee threshold in that case, and we're holding pretty steady at that low rate. So please feel free to jump in and ask questions along the way, and I will kind of move us to the next slide. Okay, the next things that we have information on to share are kind of our information on enrollment. So we're going to look at enrollment overall across the HVSA, which is what's shown here. And then we're going to break it down into some other ways of kind of teasing that apart. Yeah, Nellie, do you want to say anything about or look at enrollment, introducing that? Or did you, I missed if you already said that.
Yes, I did. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay. So kind of what you can see here is we're holding pretty steady in those 70s over SFY 24, slightly improved from kind of SFY 23 outcomes. We generally see a little bit of a trend of a little bit lower enrollment and slot out of percentage of slots filled that first quarter. For a number of reasons. There's often slot count changes and things like that that just take a little bit of a resettling, and then kind of new families and things like that too. So we generally see it start out a little bit lower in the year and uptick, which you can see over each of those last two state fiscal years. So this shows both the number of families enrolled, which you do see you don't see really many decreases there. You see a lot of kind of steady increases with the higher numbers of slots too. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, here's where we're going to start kind of breaking it down. This is information on enrollment by model, and this is the same time period, but showing kind of by model. So what you see in the kind of top bar is Parent-Child Plus. The next one is Nurse-Family Partnership. The one after that, they start to get a little bit tighter, but the one after that is Parents as Teachers, followed by, I don't think you can see if I point to it. The one that starts with in SFY 23 at 58 is a portfolio, and that 56 is the Family Spirit line. So you can kind of see how those have trended over the last couple of years. A lot of things impact different things related to that, and where we see things kind of go up and down, including those slot counts. And then another thing that we'll see more in the next slide, but I'll just point out here, is between state fiscal year 23 quarter 4 and state fiscal year 24 quarter 1, there were new programs added to these count during that time that kind of changed some of the different trajectory of some of these things too. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, another way that we have been breaking down data, so the previous one was by model. We've also been looking at model size or LIA size. So one of the things that we can do to help us kind of work towards improvement and know kind of where energy is kind of needed in terms of making a big impact towards our goals of enrollment. Ideally, we want to see, every program at that kind of benchmark we have of 85% is our goal for enrollment. It will help us to understand kind of where we're making different progress will kind of help us get more towards our goals. So what you can see here, this first line where we have a more kind of drastic jump, those are, and it's those are small LIAs. So small LIAs are kind of designated by having 7 to 30 slots. So those are what we're calling smaller LIAs. I'm just going to point out this pretty big dip right here and just kind of explain that right off the bat. 4 of our new programs fall under this small criteria. So this is primarily due to adding new programs right during this time and the ramp up period of those new programs. So those all fall under that kind of smaller criteria. Medium-sized LIAs are kind of the ones that are right now kind of holding pretty steady and more steadily close to that 85%. A medium-sized LIA is kind of designated by 31 to 64 slots. And then we have our larger LIAs, which are classified as kind of 65 to 240 slots. So a pretty big range in size for these larger LIAs. But this is where when we're starting to look at, I'll show another slide that we'll talk about this, but when we're starting to look at areas where we can kind of make impact towards getting us closer to our goal percentage of that 85, working kind of with these larger LIAs and seeing the gap of the distance from these to that 85% goal will kind of get us closer. So we're talking about a lot more children and families when it comes to the large LIAs compared to kind of the small ones, and when we're talking about our goals of enrollment specifically. So that's one of the ways that can kind of help us. One of the things that it can do for us by teasing apart the information in this way. If we go to the next slide, it'll actually show just another breakdown of the similar things. This also shows small LIAs on this first box to the left, medium-sized LIAs in that middle box, and then larger LIAs on that farther right side. So you can kind of see this. This is actually by like individual LIA. So you can see, how many are kind of how far from the kind of goals. And when we're talking about kind of smaller LIAs, this is a pretty small number of families that will take it from pretty close to the goal to pretty far down. And then when we're talking about larger LIAs or even the medium size, it's a lot. Those are obviously larger numbers. So I'd say one of the things that I want to kind of focus energy on would be that if we're trying to kind of make significant impact towards our goal, that this like pocket right here would be a really good use of energy to kind of unpack what's going on and learn more about kind of that story of what's happening with enrollment in each of these, but this one would help us kind of make closer movement towards our goal when that is needed. Yeah, thank you. Martha put a comment in the chat, and I just want to elaborate on that a little bit. So sites are given kind of a year to ramp up before their slot counts are added. So that means that one of the things that also happens is when we have an expansion, if we could go back one slide, when we have an expansion like there was in SFY 24, what we'll see is that the number of slots that even if it happened before and they have a year, so it could have happened in 23, the denominator, so that percentage and what we're of slots, we don't actually increase the expectation for serving more slots until that next year. So that's when you see kind of those dips be a little drastic is in between those expansions too, because the expectation is that, and we even see programs get like well surpassed 100% because while they had expansion and we didn't set the expectation for them to meet all of their slots at that time, some of them have anyway, in particular with PC Plus, and then we see percentages that are kind of really skewed in that over 100. So we've kind of corrected for that in these presentations, but there are some sites that kind of don't need that ramp up period and go just kind of cruise right up to the almost at full capacity or past full capacity. Yeah, thank you, Nina. So when you see small programs, there are some inherent challenges due to size and location and community. That's true. And then smaller LIAs, I would also go to say that there's a lot less kind of staffing and home visitors. And then the impact is much greater when you have kind of any of those changes and things that impact enrollment. The impact on the percentage is a lot larger for those with smaller numbers. Yeah. Are there any questions about the enrollment information shown? This is all the enrollment information I'm going to show. I have one more slide on kind of where referrals are coming from, but I'd love to just kind of hear if there are any questions about enrollment or anything like that. Yeah, we can just leave it on this slide while we answer those questions. Marilyn?
Yeah, I had a question about enrollment. One of the things, one of the breakouts I wondered about was TANF slots, because one of the things I hear when we talk about openings is agencies will say, we don't have any openings except if they're on TANF. So I wondered if you looked at that, because I know that is really challenging.
Yeah, I do not have a slide on that today, but we have looked at that, and it is really LIA by LIA. So we can look at in particular how it's impacting things like the larger LIAs and see if that's a thing. But it really varied LIA to LIA which funding streams had the kind of less enrollment for those. It wasn't a clear and consistent kind of trend across all of TANF, which is what we looked for.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Mhm.
And we do know that that is an area, a challenging area, and we continue to work with our partners on that. So it is, Marilyn, we are aware that that does bring some challenges as it relates to enrollment. So that is also taken into account.
Mhm.
Any questions from our guests?
I'm going to let it set on this we'll move on, but what's showing right now are referrals and where referrals are coming from. And this information can be really helpful also in kind of working towards improvements and changes in enrollment. And so we can kind of think and look at this is a really great kind of evaluative tool of if we put energy and efforts into getting referral sources from certain places to help support enrollment, we can kind of use things like this to monitor and see how those are working. So we can do that kind of at the state level, but I also think that this is a really great piece of information for LIAs to know about how things are working for your LIA. And if you have kind of targeted and specific efforts or desires to get referrals more from specific places, this information could be really helpful in kind of seeing how that's working. Yeah. Thanks, Marilyn. That is all I have.
Any other questions for Ashley? That can be from HVAC member or from our guests. Great, so we are going to go ahead and take a break here. Ashley, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to share with us and to share that data and information. And we're looking forward to more opportunities for HVAC to spend some time in the data and to do some discussions. So we appreciate that. So we will take, I think we're doing pretty good on time. Let's let's take 15 minutes instead of 20. So it is 10:19 right now. So let's come back at 10:34. So we'll take 15 minutes instead of 20. So we'll be back at 10:34. So just turn on your cameras or just give us a thumbs up so we know we have majority of you back. I see some thumbs ups. Thank you. Or any other emoji you would love to use. Feel free to do that. Okay. Looks like. All right. So we are going to move on to our program and budget update. And I think Laura's going to kick this off and have a couple of slides in here as well. So Laura, I'm going to hand this off to you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all. I know we've had a few more folks join throughout the morning. If you can, I'll just do a quick logistic check-in. Rename yourself in your participant list to your name, and if you are an HVAC member or guest, and then also please chat in your name and organization and the same thing as well. I will share, I have my 6-month-old coworker here with me next to me, and he is verbose. He likes to chat, so you may hear him in the background as well. He just woke up from his nap and had a snack. So his name is Mansa, and he's joining us today as well. You can go to the next slide. Please, Jessica, thank you. So Erica provided a wonderful policy and budget update from the state perspective. Thank you, Erica. And wanted to provide you all a little bit of what we're learning from this as well. So in addition to what Erica shared, just a couple of other kind of nuggets that you might have heard had you joined to the DCYF webinar. There are a number of lawsuits and other kind of policy things that are influencing how the legislature looks at DCYF budget. Hi, yes, hi. And specifically juvenile rehabilitation and child welfare, there is really a focus on safety and supporting staff. And so early learning really did have a bit of a quote unquote kind of disproportionate reduction in some of what we've seen in budgets as well. So just noting that. We anticipate that the reductions will be significant for early learning, including home visiting. And they also include some staffing reductions as well. So we have more to learn, and we'll have to wait until we have a final budget for that. But also wanted to note that the McPhee program, the maternal infant early childhood home visiting program at the federal level, has been increasing. So we actually received about $750,000 more in our application budget that we're working on right now. It's due on Monday. That will support us to do some increases within our McPhee budget, but there are other unknowns in the federal landscape. Yes, you do have a lot to say. But the McPhee program is, as we know it right now, still consistent, and we're in the 3rd year of a 5-year authorization and have not heard of any specific changes to that program at this time. Outside of the federal reorganization and the loss of staff, the program itself is consistent at this point with the guidance that we've received for next year. So we have likely reductions in the state and some small increases from federal budget to be considering as well. Can we go to the next slide, please? Given this context, DCYF made a decision that there would be a delay of the implementation of race-based payments for nurse family partnership and parents as teachers because we do not anticipate that there would be sufficient funding for implementing rates. For those models that had moved to rates, those rates are quote unquote fully funded. So it's not a partial rate, it's funded at the rate that the rate was set at. And given the budget climate, we know that we could not do that. with our Nurse Family Partnership and Parents as Teachers, with the draft rate really indicating, how much money we would need, and that won't be available to us. Additionally, at this point, we do not have approval from the federal government, currently called HRSA, the Health Resources and Services Administration, that administers the MCV program to implement rates with MCV, because generally federal grants, the gold standard is to use a cost reimbursement model, but there is a pathway for that, but we have not yet received approval for that. Hi, Steve there. So I wanted to let you know that we will continue implementation of the rates-based methodology for those models that we're already funding, specifically because we have implemented it and they are being funded at the full rate. Erica, go ahead.
Sorry. So thank you, Laura. I appreciate that. And I love hearing that little voice. So question about the communication with HRSA. So I know that given all of the federal uncertainty, I think is a generous word, maybe. I'm curious in your communications with HRSA with the rate request. So my question is, this request probably went in a while ago, pre-current administration. So it went in the Biden administration. So what was the timing? What timing have they expected? Were you given to have an answer by, and what types of information have you been told they need to make this decision?
We have not submitted yet a formal request. Our fiscal department has been doing some landscape analysis about what other, resources or approaches other states are using to do what's called a fixed rate subaward. It's a technical term that's allowed in federal policy to do this. And at this point, we have gotten guidance from HRSA on what we think they will need. But because it's actually not ever been done before, with a MCV program to use this approach, a fixed rate subaward, we're not totally sure. So we have materials prepared. Finance has been putting together some of their learnings from the landscape analysis, and it will probably go in, my guess would be late summer. And we have to do an approval request for each of our grant applications that are open. So it'd be two requests. So, so there is not yet a submitted request, Erica, and we don't know. When we've asked them how long it would take to review, they have not given us any specific answer on that, especially given that their staff now, I think, has been reduced fairly significantly at the federal level. Okay, we're going to have hop to the next slide. And if there are other questions, please raise your hand. That helps me see that you have one. Thank you. Okay, so DCYF has submitted or sent letters to all of our funded local implementation agencies about these. Oh, sorry, is that one not doing what I wanted it to do? All of the expected or what we know so far about changes to the state fiscal year contracts, specifically standardizing caseloads for Nurse Family Partnership and Parents as Teachers to 21 per nurse home visitor for NFP and 18 for Parents as Teachers. This was based on the rate methodology, using the rate, and then supporting some what we hope is a reduced workload because it overall reduces some of the families that are expected to be seen by each home visitor. We have started a program review of performance over the last basically 2 fiscal years. Yes, you have a lot to say. Over the last 2 fiscal years, based on monitoring data information, monitoring information that is available to us. He likes to talk over me. Maybe if I take him out of his chair so he can see you all, then he will not be so loud. You want to say hello? Bless you. So all of these letters have gone out, and program specialists are in the process of scheduling meetings with all of the local implementation agencies to review, discuss generally how they have been performing over the last couple of years, as well as any information that we have about contracting for state fiscal year 26. At this time, because we don't know what the final budget is, we have not obviously made any decisions about what kinds of changes will be made with contracts, except for that we anticipate that we will need to make some. Okay, I'm going to have you go to the next slide. And our goals, obviously, in that are hopefully similar to what you've heard from Erica from the budget writers, are to minimize service disruptions and support the stable operation of our operations of our local implementation agencies. So we'll be reviewing our slots and budgets and also trying to understand where we might have some ability to have some variation with our tribal programs, because we know there's just really kind of a different approach that we need to take as a government agency with tribes as well. Okay, next slide. Let's see, Nellie, I'm just tracking here if I have another one. I think this might be yours, Nellie, to talk about.
Before we transition to talking a little bit about the McPhee budget, are there any questions about the slides Laura just presented? Any questions from HVAC members? Any questions from our guests? Oops. Go ahead, Matthew.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the great information you're sharing. I'm Matthew Richardson with Nurse Family Partnership. And I wanted to ask regarding the caseload standardization slide and information you'd shared. Nurse Family Partnership had done model elements change around caseload numbers that has caused some confusion, because it allows for a range of 21 to 25 clients, but that's trying to take into account that funders like McVie required that you be within 85% of the target caseload amount, which would be, if you have a target caseload amount of 25, 21 clients. And so we would be still looking to have an expectation for individual nurse home visitors to carry a caseload of 25 clients, allowing them to have a range down to 21 within that 85% range to be within fidelity. What we'd be worried about is if we say 21, that programs or staff will think they can go within 85% of 21 and decrease further down. Just wanted to check to see if we have aligned understanding on that.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. The short answer is yes, because programs will be expected to stay within model fidelity for implementation of Nurse Family Partnership and to continue to receive funding for providing NFP. So that's the short answer, is yes, there is understanding, and it becomes a little complicated when it comes into monitoring and such. But yes, we share that understanding of the national model's expectation.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
About slides, and yes, the slides I think can be available now during the meeting and will be shared after as well. Yeah, Matthew, sorry, did you have another question?
Yes, I had a part two. Thanks, Laura. Just wanted to then, going back to the rates plan, knowing that we're still in an uncertain place with the state budget not finalized, but just to make sure, so we have some programs that have moved to rates and then some that have not. And so we kind of have a kind of a two-tier system, some rates funded and some at the more status quo pre-rates going forward in the meantime. Is that correct?
Double muted. Yes, we have some models that have gone forward with rates and other models that have not. Yep.
And so with that rate, as I understand, involved kind of a boost to kind of right size contracts, things like that. Is there any interim steps? I know you've done several as we've been going through the process, but interim steps, because programs that have not gone through rates will then kind of be in a pre-right sizing situation. And those that have will be more right size, and that disparity can cause challenges for individual programs to continue to meet family needs.
Yes, we are aware of that. And what Nellie was going to talk a little bit about here on the McPhee slide is how we are hoping to do some of that right sizing with the available funding we have with McPhee as one step. But I think it will really take us having the full budget picture, Matthew, to be able to know how and what we need to do as we're thinking about both cuts and that we have not maintained pace with the cost of facilities. So that will be, I think, conversation that we will need to have with the Homebuilding Advisory Committee post final budget as well. Today is a little bit more, my goodness, theoretical. And what we might want to consider, where we hope we would have more information in, the next month about what will be needed. So, Nellie, I'm going to pass it to you to talk to McPhee. Want to shout in my ear.
Okay.
Thank you
Laura.
for the information.
Go ahead, Matthew. Was there anything else you wanted to?
No, I was just saying thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Okay. So I'll move on, and if there are any other questions, we'll have an opportunity for that too as well. So as Laura mentioned earlier, we are working on our McPhee application for state fiscal year, for the upcoming state fiscal year. And it's due the 21st, which is Monday. So we are doing really well and no problems with getting that in. It's not as involved as it was last year. Last year, it was like completing a whole new application for McPhee. It was really, really involved last year. This year, they're interested in us sharing any changes that we have, any changes that we've had, or any predicting anything that we see will change over the application period. And they did the similar approach that we had last year, which is our base funding and then match. And this year we have an opportunity for a second match dollar amount that we are definitely interested in pursuing. So as you can see here on the chart, we had our base formula stayed the same. So there was no increase there, but we did have an increase in our federal match, right around a little bit over 700,000. So just wanted to highlight where we've been since federal fiscal year 23. So that shows you just where we are and where we've seen an increase. Next slide, please. And as Laura started to talk about, we are looking at doing a couple of things with that increase that we are getting from McPhee. So we are looking at increasing LIA budget. So we looked at the rate and worked with it to see how close to the actual of identified rate we could get. And we made it to about 72.5%. And so there are some LIAs that will see a significant increase. There are some LIAs that will see a slightly minimal one. And there, I think about 5 that may not see an increase at this point based on this round, because they're already above that 72.5% of the regionalized rates. So, and that's what that first bullet talks about. The second bullet just gives you an idea of how much we are increasing our LIA budget allocation. So it's an increase from last year of 650. So we are thinking about it and trying to work towards getting to actual costs. So we know that we still have a significant gap there, but we are making steps to address that. The other thing we did was increase our indirect. So our indirect went up from 1.5 to 2.7. And that still is below kind of what the expectation is for our state, for our agency, for our indirect, but we were able to do that with this increase as well. So the other categories that we cover with our budget, and they're detailed here, have remained the same or seen some really, really small increases or decreases. So just wanted to share with you how we were allocating that $750K. Any questions about that? Cassie.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I'm totally understanding correctly. So I'm going to start with like how I think I understand this, and then I have a question. But let me know if I'm like getting a little bit off track. So like it seems to me that even though we're not able to implement, or we are not currently implementing rates for NFP and parents as teachers, that there are some like incremental steps moving in that direction, like what's on this slide right here. And but one of the significant differences between what's represented here and implementing rates would be the payment methodology. There may be other differences also. But you know, it's moving in that direction. What is the benefit to this approach, like staying in the current payment methodology while moving in the direction of rates? Clearly not able to fully fund it as of yet. Cross our fingers, maybe someday. But what's the benefit of this approach versus saying we are going to move to rates and we're going to change like the way that the payment methodology happens, but we're not going to be able to fund it entirely? Does that make sense, or am I fundamentally misunderstanding sort of how things are?
Cassie, I think I'm tracking. I think there's two kind of maybe responses, and Nellie, you can jump in too if you're understanding the question differently than I am. Is the first is one, we don't have approval to do it with MCV. So we can't move forward with that payment methodology at this time with our MCV funded programs. And we have heard feedback from our LAAs that they don't want a split approach. So even if we could partially implement it with NFP and PAT, it would require kind of two different accounting structures to manage that. So that's one thing we've heard, is that to fully implement, or not to do like a partial, like one way and another way. So, and then secondly, our assumption is that because there's not additional funding available, we were to fully implement rates, we would have to make fairly significant program reductions across NFP and PAT to implement, because we don't have the budget available. So the benefit of not moving forward at this time is that we're not doing a big reduction process, which we may be doing anyways, but it supports stability in the contract approach, and doesn't have a bifurcated approach for payment methodology within NFP and PAT if we were to move forward with state funded only. I don't know if I'm answering your question exactly, Cassie. I don't know if that's where you're going. I think it was a philosophical question, maybe.
No, that did help to answer my question. So yeah, and I guess I was also kind of making the assumption that like we could have moved forward with asking MCV approval and just have chosen not to. And maybe that is not the right way of thinking about it. So yeah, okay. But that does help me understand sort of the viewpoint of like, this felt like the way forward that was going to lead to the least reduction in services, except due to the state budget situation, there might still be reduction in services. Okay.
And Cassie, we didn't have everything we needed to be able to move forward with completing the request from our federal partners to move towards rates. And so the analysis that Laura mentioned was just completed, and the report was provided a week or two ago. So our fiscal partners were not prepared to be able to kind of move forward, but we've been receiving technical assistance all along from HRSA to move us along that process. But hopefully all of this answers your question.
Thank you.
Marilyn. Oh, was it Erica first? I don't remember.
It's first, I think.
Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, real quickly, just building on Cassie's question, and I know the least about this, but have the programs been asked to revisit the bifurcation given the timing on the HRSA? Okay, like, have they been updated that it could be a while?
I don't think we've we've revisited it, Erica. I've been out for a few months, and Renee, who knows more about that, is out right now, and could share if there was messaging that happened while I was out about that. I don't know, Nellie, if you know anything more about that.
I think we've provided updates as to where we are when we've done office hours and things like that, but not like a formal, here's a letter to. But we have provided some updates as to where we are with this process. Marilyn?
Yeah, my question was just on the previous slide where it had the federal match and then the state match. Like, is that an increase in the match that the state would provide? Or is that what they're already doing?
Jessica, do you want to flip back to that slide so we can look at it, please? It can be captured within our existing budget, Marilyn. So there's specific requirements for it. It basically has to be almost the same as what we're doing with MCPHE. So it has to be the evidence-based programs. There's specific requirements around it. But we have, at this point, depending on what happens with the state budget, had sufficient funding to meet both the maintenance of effort requirement. So there's a requirement for maintenance of effort, and then there's additional requirement for match for us to be able to leverage the federal match. And so far, we've been able to do that with no problem. Again, depending on what the state budget looks like, we may have to revisit to make sure we still map onto that a requirement. Given that this year, because this is all new for the federal, this is all new to HRSA too. This is only the second year of the state match. As you can see, they provided additional guidance in the application this year about what is expected. And so again, we'll have to do an analysis of after we get the state budget finalized to confirm it we still meet.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? Any questions from our guests? Could you move to the next slide, please? Jessica, and then the next one. So Laura, I'm going to hand this back to you.
All right. So this is where we hope to have a discussion with you all. I appreciate, Erica, you sharing with us the budget writer's assumption that there would not be reductions with the proposed Senate and House budgets. That is not how we are understanding it internally at DCYF. And so we wanted to have a conversation with you all, Homebusing Advisory Committee. As I shared before, no decisions have been made at this time, though we will be having to respond to this fairly quickly once the budget is passed, and may need to have an ad hoc meeting with you all.
Can I make a clarification? I should say that to say now, if you make different decisions around like funding, if you take the amount of money that you have and you fund programs differently, but they're assuming based on what they show as your spending pattern and your allocation, that you would be able to make up that $8 million. That you have sufficient funding that won't be spent this year to make up that $8 million. So I want to be clear that is what they're seeing in the spending patterns in this biennium.
So
if you have plans for that $8 million, that hasn't been communicated with them, then there would be
and I think that's where we need to have clarification, Erica, internally, because I don't think that I don't know that those assumptions are accurate, I guess is where we have some follow-up internally to do to make sure that the information that they're looking at is accurate, because I don't think that it is, nor do I think that there's $8 million that is available. I'm not sure where that's all coming from. So the short answer is we have some work to do internally at DCYF to clarify the assumptions that the budget writers are making about this. So we are assuming, even if we move forward with steady state, not changing methodology of how things are distributed, that we would have to make reductions in programming. So our question for you all is, what considerations should we make or should we be holding as we're thinking about reductions in the budget for programs, assuming that we're talking primarily here about funded slots, knowing that there will likely be reductions across the system. So not just with LIAs, we'll be having to look at internal DCYF and our other contracted partners as well that provide supports to programs. So really this is an open discussion first for our HVAC members to weigh in on what should we be holding and thinking about as we consider state fiscal year 26 budget landscape and the likely need for some reduction amount unknown at this time. And just want to open it up for conversation with you all as well. So first, I'm going to step back and invite HVAC members to raise their hand, come off mute. These indicators here that you see on the slide are just some ideas for us to start with. Performance, again, letters have been sent out to programs describing their performance on contract requirements. Community risk factors, tribal programs, rural programs, program size. These are some of the things that we looked at in the enrollment slides that Department of Health shared earlier. What considerations should we be holding as we think about funding distribution for next year and the likely need to do reductions? Marilyn, go ahead.
Yeah, so a couple things. So performance, LIAs we've already had a conversation with you about that, and it included enrollment, staffing, and fidelity to the model. So I do want to put it out there that LIAs are assuming this is going to be a consideration, and maybe we're talking how big a consideration, but I think those are, I think performance is something that is important to look at. In community risk factors, are we talking about like the last community needs assessment, home visiting needs assessment that we did?
That's one example. There are others
Okay.
that we could look at as well with the prevention dashboard, at-risk locale. There's other data, I guess. So that's part of what we want you all to think through with us.
Okay. So I'm really familiar with the home visiting needs assessment. What was the other one you said? Prevention dashboard?
Yeah, there's some data that DCYF has been looking at, and I can chat it in here in a minute, where we look at the locales, which is a specific geographic unit, I guess, that is where we're looking at the highest level of intakes, child welfare intakes. So again, thinking specifically about child abuse and neglect prevention. And there's a bunch of other data on there too, and I'll chat that in, but that's not a needs assessment per se, Marilyn, but a data source for us to think about.
Okay. All right. That's helpful. And I guess I just would, I don't know how many tribal programs and how we take it into account. I think with the history of broken promises with working with tribes, I do think it's a huge risk to, I think I read some, read data, like if you if you break trust, you know, it's probably going to be 10 years before you can approach again about implementation. So, you know, I am concerned about that. So that's my comment for now.
Gretchen?
Gretchen Toller, and thank you for this. I am thinking about the community risk factors, but I'm also thinking about what data is available from programs or sites that on who they're serving and the risk factors. So I know, for example, NFP has a report now that talks about like risk factors, and if you're meeting more than 3 of the risk factors. So I'm just curious if that's something that can be pulled in any way, because I think that is really important. Because you could be in a community that has high risks, but if sites are not serving those individuals, then we may not be meeting what we're hoping to meet. So just throwing that out there.
Thanks, Gretchen. Katie, I see your hand.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I think Gretchen brought up something important. Just not so much to put it on potential clients, but like whether there's a fundamental match between maybe the model and the families that they're looking to serve. And so whether that like those risk factors are being addressed. But actually what I came on here to say was that I don't know how this would translate into the conversation, but I think it's an important piece of the puzzle is that for many of the programs who are peer-based models or community-based models with cultural matches, that there are fundamental ripple effects to potentially reducing funding, where oftentimes the staff are some of the same folks who are being served. And so losing positions, losing roles, those opportunities can have effects beyond simply cutting services. That's what I have to say about that.
I'm just going to do a couple of what I think are synthesis, and I should have said this. DCOF colleagues, Jessica and I can't remember who else is on, but if I'm hoping you're supporting us capturing notes here. I know this is also recorded, so we can go back to it. But I heard Marilyn, the second thing you said, and the first one I'm not going to probably recapture very well, but around the importance of trust building with tribes, and if we've made a commitment to funding, how important it is that we stick with that commitment, because we may not have the trust built to do it again if we pull away from those agreements. So that's one thing I heard. Gretchen, I heard you talk about is there a way to measure how programs are reaching the intended population, and can that be considered? Marilyn, I think the other thing you also said was about community risk factors too, and for us to look at that. Katie, thank you for bringing to us the ripple effects of reductions, particularly in models that are staffed and designed by and for the community. And your hand is up again, so Katie, please jump in again. And I hope I'm capturing what you're saying, kind of trying to synthesize a little bit of what I'm hearing. Go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking to follow up on the other comment that, gosh, my memory is all of a sudden really bad. Okay, well, the first person, was it Gretchen who said this? Anyway, that about breaking tribal trust, and the tribal partners are really important, and those are carefully built relationships. And I guess I'm thinking to extend that further, and it goes back to that ripple effect, is thinking down the road in 5 years, 10 years, where are the places where that trust will really need to be rebuilt, and where are there places where there isn't trust yet anyway, and maybe it'd be worth coming back to, or maybe there's not as cohesive of a community. I mean, it's such a hard conversation, so I don't know, but I think that's a consideration too. If there's, you know, a place where something is thriving and has this community, has built up this community to pull the rug under it, versus a program that, how do you balance that with a program that maybe is serving folks effectively, but without that sort of broader connection? And what will that look like in 5 or 10 years for the people in those communities? And hopefully, when, I like to pretend like things might get better at some point, you know, and so when things maybe get better at some point, how would we rebuild in those places?
Thanks, Katie. Christy.
Yes, one of the things that I was thinking about, and maybe the community needs assessment does share this, but I think we really need to look at where home visiting is helping to bridge the desert areas across the state of Washington. And so when a home visitor position or slots would leave, we leave families really high and dry, as opposed to the program has maybe a little bit of a slot reduction, but there's something else to pick up in maybe a different way, maybe not as well, but at least a way that a family would still be able to access the services that they need to be healthy.
Thanks, Christy.
Yeah.
Adrian.
Yeah, I wonder, a couple of things that I haven't seen here is, you know, you are working with us right now as a community and as a agencies that work for DCYF, but I think it's very important to engage the actual impacted families within these counties. I think it is important to have their voice in the decision-making process of how this is going to look like. Also, something that it's not there is what is the priority. I think it's important to define it. Who is the priority in the populations that we want to make sure don't lose the funding, because they will be more impacted. And the last piece that I want to mention, I think we need to think about how are we going to do these reductions. I think there needs to be a phase, for example, as a ramp down period, so that the impact is not just abruptly happening one time, but that's something just food for thought.
Thanks, Adrian. Both for Christy and for you, Adrian, if there was a, so Christy, thinking about your reflection of other services or other programming in the community that may be available, I would, if there's a particular data source or a particular way to look at that, if you want to share any other insights, that would be great. And Adrian, kind of same for you, if there's an approach or a thought that you had about how to engage families in the process that we would be going through, I would appreciate any reflections or insights on that too. And you can put them in chat, or if there's anything that you had ideas about how for that, it would be great. Yeah. Checking in with other HVAC members before we open it for public. And then the next slide may just be, is that a kind of a prompting slide? I forget. Yeah, okay, thank you. Because the next slide is for guests and other folks that are here. So just give it another moment for HVAC members if there's anything else you want to come off mute and share, and then we'll go. Thanks, Erica, go for it.
So I guess I need a little reminder. So I think we all can assume that underspend will be swept. That's just nature of the business right now. So what are you assuming? So you're talking cuts, and you're basing this conversation on the Senate and the House potentially. I guess I'm just questioning what is the presumption that leads to this conversation, and what number? So you're presuming there's no give in the budget, anywhere in your budget to buffer any of the cuts that is being proposed by the Senate or the House, and what number are you presuming? And you're presuming it would all come as service cuts to families? I guess I'm trying to get, what are we trying to solve for?
No, well, we don't know how much, but I can tell you how I interpreted in the budget conversation I had yesterday with our budget manager, is it would be a reduction in, so right now our state authority that we had outside of the provisos was 14.3. Why are you always talking when I'm talking? Was 14.3. What the Senate budget has going forward is 9.
Wait, can you say, I missed that first part. What did you say?
Yes. The current budget for state fiscal year 25, our authority, that's not including our provisos and expansion. Because our
25, 25.
For 25 is 14.
Uh-huh.
What they show in 26 is 9.
Uh-huh.
So that is revenue, not $5 million less that we can spend, and revenue into the account.
Okay. So that would be the sweep plus the 4 million for that. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's not in the account balance $4 million to repurpose, because they're going to sweep it, right? Whatever is there is swept, plus getting a reduced budget of $4 million. This is the Senate budget, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I do not assume that it's all services, but certainly there's not $5 million ever else to cut as well. So it's basically a $5 million program reduction is how I was told to interpret it yesterday.
Okay.
For 26.
And so the spending authority is 30. Well, but that's only the state part. So what about okay. So the spending authority for federal and state is 73 for the biennium. So there's not any federal money that could help make up for some of the loss of the state?
The only federal money we have is McVie grant. And as we shared before, the McVie grant cannot supplant state cuts. So we can fund our McVie program like we are, and we will, including the increase, but we cannot supplant state budget reductions with McVie dollars. It is not allowed.
Got it. Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and there are no other federal funds. So we don't have any ARPA anymore. FFPSA is not, we're not drawing that down. There's only McVie.
Thanks.
So if the House budget does not obligate us to have the same conversation, because we can absorb the budget changes in the House budget. It basically reduces the authority $500,000, which we can manage without making reductions. The Senate budget, we're seeing, because it effectively reduces with the underspend, the ongoing underspend reduction plus the $4 million, it reduces our budget, our current operating budget by $5 million.
Okay.
Go ahead, Marilyn.
Go ahead, Marilyn.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify and make sure I understand. So this is a similar conversation that we had with LIAs, in that we don't know yet. Like we don't know what's gonna come out by April 27th. So if we do have to reduce slots, what are our what's our framework? What is our priorities? And I mean, I guess we're also making the assumption, is the only option reducing?
Oops, Marilyn, you went on mute on accident, I think. Whoops.
Sorry. I realize this is a difficult thing to say, so but are we just looking at slots? And I know like one of your values, so I'm assuming that, you know, your values is to not cut services to families.
Correct. So I don't know if what you're asking, Marilyn, is are we looking at, will we have to take reduction elsewhere, DCYF budget, our Start Early,
right.
DOH, other? The answer is yes, we'll have to be looking everywhere.
Yeah.
Given the potential of the Senate budget. And again, it's the unknown. So how much do we plan for the unknown when we may know in 10 days? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question in regards to MCV funding. So my understanding is that MCV funding cannot stand alone, correct? It has to be supplemented. It can't fund a program 100%. Is that correct?
It can fund the program 100%, and it does. We have some programs that are fully MCV funded. Yep.
Laura, I just wanted to
was there more? Just a second. Was that Vanessa? Was there more that you wanted to? Is there more to that question, or like another idea or thought you had behind that question?
Oh, I was just wanting clarification in regards to that, if a program could be funded 100% MCV.
Okay, sorry, Nina, go ahead.
No, I was just elevating that Aowen had some comments in the notes or chat, and I was wondering, Aowen, if you wanted to come off mute since we're guests are.
Yes, thank you, Nina.
Sure, thank you. I had just had a couple of thoughts, one of which was I think looking at community risks is important, and I think also looking at combining that with looking at risks for the families that are actually being served, because I do know that there are some areas where community risks might be less, but that it's also true that the families that are being served there are very high risk, and that we wouldn't want to I don't know, it feels important to take that into account too, that just because there's a community with less risks doesn't mean that the families that are there that are most at need aren't very high need. And then I just also wanted to say, I agree with, was it Christy? Someone was talking about looking at what other services are available, particularly home visiting services in any area before looking at cuts, because I think it's important that we don't leave deserts if at all possible. So those were my two thoughts, and thank you for letting me share them.
Thanks, Aowen. And others, please raise your hand at this point. We have a good number of guests here and want you all to use the space for sharing thoughts or asking questions as well. Sarah, please.
Hi, I just wanted to bring up one thing that hasn't come up yet, which is simply retention of very high quality staff. And I think, Cassie, your point about, is it possible for some programs to reduce slots or FTE slightly? That's something that we have already looked at internally as we're right now going through our budget process for the next year. And what we've decided is, yes, we would actually, if we could take some of the savings and invest it in our staff, we just have to give them a cost of living increase. Child Strive being one of the first programs to contract with the state for home visiting services, have seen that gap between what is really funded operationally and what it's required to administer the program. has grown to such a point that we're really struggling to afford to keep our staff. And these are people who are so passionate about the work that they're doing it, even though I'm sure they could be paid more to do some things somewhere else, like at a school or a hospital. They're people with lived experience. They, we have a bilingual staff member, and they've gone through all the PAT training, all the NFP training. We have invested in them, and rightly so, and they have a lot of experience. We don't see a ton of turnover. They're our best asset, honestly, is our people. And so whatever we can do to retain those jobs, those positions in the community, as someone else pointed out, that it does have a ripple effect. The trust that they've established with families is very impressive. And if we can keep as many of our people as we can, even if that means serving a little bit fewer families, then we will try to do that.
Thanks, Sarah. Krista, please.
I just wanted to share, we were talking about making reductions, kind of what to consider. And when we talk about maybe performance being a part of that, as we all just got our letters and, saw what kind of things were being considered, that there seems to be there needs to be more to the story, to the consideration, because in areas where programs are really rural or maybe underfunded, they're already lacking resources, and they're having to work even harder to meet these performance standards, and as opposed to other programs that maybe have more resources or more funding. And taking away even more resources seems like that would be just a little unjust.
Thanks, Krista. Gretchen.
So I know this is a strange time to bring this up because we're talking about reductions, right? But I know at one point for PAT and NFP, when the rates, there was a question whether rates would be moving forward. There were conversations around how to give those programs some increase, because as other programs have moved to rates, it did, in many cases, result in an increase. And, when we were looking at like true cost of services and things, so I realize it's a hard time to bring this up, but I am wondering if that is part of this conversation anymore. Just thinking about what Sarah was saying, and I mean, thinking back, 6 months ago when we were looking at this for PAT and NFP, that was something that was being considered, whether that could happen in this next contract year. I know it'd be minimal, but I just want to explore whether that's still something being looked at.
Gretchen, I'm going to interpolate a little bit more. I think so. What I'm hearing is, even in the context, not even, let me say it differently. How are we considering that at this point the budgets are not sufficient to pay for the cost of service, even in a budget reduction environment? So there's some choices for us to consider, I think, as HVAC, and this is maybe a next meeting conversation, is in those reductions, do we need to be adjusting for some of those cost of living in a different way? So not just reducing as is, but really doing a reconsideration or something like that. So I think that's what I'm hearing a little bit, is how are we considering that we know already that we're not paying for services, and is there a different approach that we need to take to try to manage that at the same time? Maybe that's what you're saying, maybe not. And please jump in, and then after that, Alicia, I'll invite you to come up.
Yes, just I know that was part of it, is looking at those gaps. And so sorry, someone came to my door. So just looking at those gaps and looking forward with that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Alicia, please. And then Aylin after Alicia.
I wanted to bring up that some programs had reductions with this contract year because they were performing over caseload. And so that was something that already happened. And I would wonder if that can be taken into consideration of programs that have already seen reduction in slots through this process. And in addition to that, taking into consideration performance, not only with like rural programs or, smaller programs or different programs, but those programs like Sarah's, like mine, who are drastically below the rate, which I know we're not going to get to the rate, but if you look at performance based on what we are currently paid per slot, that might be something interesting to look at. I know in my particular program, and we look at retention, and that's an area that we struggle in. We struggle in it because we don't have much money to pay our staff. And so I would hope that as we explore this, that all of those factors are brought into decision-making when it comes to reducing slots. That said, if it comes to reducing slots and increasing the per case rate, I know we're not going to get to rates, but the reimbursement process or metric for that, I would be with Sarah, is that being able to sustain the program and create it and make it be sustainable rather than having to find outside dollars to bring in is preferable to maintaining my existing slots.
Thank you, Alicia. Aylin, and then Corey, you're up next after that.
I think another part of this conversation I just want to sort of elevate is the piece around moving forward with increasing, or at least for some of us, it would be increasing the number of slots that we would be required to have, and not knowing if our total amount is going to be reduced in that amount. So I don't know if all programs are sitting in this, but it does feel like a particularly interesting spot to be sitting in, where we would be, in order to get to that 18, we would be increasing slots and not knowing if we're actually going to get a decrease in the amount of money we're getting at the same time. So that feels a little bit sort of counterproductive in terms of us being able to support our staff and provide quality services. And I would also fully agree that how do we create enough support for staff that we're not stressing our staff with these changes. And I think that seeing our staff as one of our most important resources is hugely important in these processes. That yes, we want to hold families up, but if we don't hold staff up and make sure that they're in a good place, they aren't going to be able to provide the services that we really want to provide in the ways we want to provide them. So thank you.
Thank you, Aylin. Corey, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Corey Sylvie. I am from the Suquamish tribe, and I work with the Changing Tides Helping Hands home visiting program as a case carrying supervisor. And I think that when thinking about home visiting as a service itself, and what I've learned about home visiting in my own tribal community and the impacts that we've been able to make, I really wish that the letters sent out to programs would have had a messaging of self-preservation. When we got our letter, which was shortly after some other programs and supervisors had received their letters, I was in a space where emotions were high, extremely valid emotions, and these were with professionals that I truly admire, that I also believe are extremely valuable to the work that we do here in Washington, across Washington. And once I received my letter, I was able to be in that same space that those other supervisors were in, my peers, so to speak. And the last thing I wanted to do was forward that letter onto our tribal leadership, because what that letter read was that we're not successful. It did not tell our story. It didn't reflect the experiences that we've had as home visiting staff. It didn't convey the practices that we have in place to keep birthing people safe and to welcome new babies into our community. That letter didn't say any of that. And the narrative that I would have to add to that would be 3 times as long as the letter itself. And I know that I understand that those letters were sent in an unprecedented time. That doesn't really need to be a reminder. But I think that because of the work that we do, there could have been so much more care and intention written into that letter, that in this time, facing budget cuts, we are looking to preserve the employees, the home visitors, the families, and the services that exist in Washington State. That is the mission. Because, not being in contract compliance because we haven't met all of our essential requirements doesn't show that for the last 3 years, our essential requirements have went up. Our letter didn't say that. Our letter also didn't say that as a part of the solution, that as a program supervisor, I came forward with what, as a program, we could afford to give back to the state or to not receive this next year, looking at our enrollment and our staffing. The letter didn't say that. And so finance and grants and tribal council and the executive director won't know any of that. And when we talk about, staff retention and job satisfaction, those relationships that we have with our own internal systems, with our community partners, it felt dismissed in receiving that letter. And I've yet to respond because I'm not speaking for myself. I so appreciate, the focus on trust relationships with tribes and tribal grantees, because I feel very seen. But I also want to remind people that oftentimes in those trust relationships, tribes are asking for the minimum. We're not asking for double or triple of what non-tribal grantees are getting or receiving. We're asking for the minimum of that relationship. And we want that for all of our other programs. We want our other programs, to be able to stay hopeful and to keep their staff and to serve as many families as possible. We want them to hold tight to whatever funding and services that they have, because we want to be in good relationship, tribal or not. But the process of that letter, I know that getting messaging out to the grantees was important. I just wish that we would have been handled with more care in that letter. I wish that there would have been more strengths-based messaging, that the overall vacant slots in the state were this many, and your program's slots are a part of this number, versus you're in the red, you're in the red, you're in the red, you're in the red. Because then circling back from that and then being asked to be a part of the solution doesn't feel, it doesn't feel genuine. And I think it could have been handled differently. And so I hope that moving forward, once we do know more, once you know more and you have action steps behind the information that you get and you know how that's going to impact programs, I hope that more consideration is given to how that messaging reaches your grantees. Because we know that as services are cut in other places in Washington state, that families are going to start coming towards us and those slots aren't going to be there. And that funding's not going to be there. That as they're getting denied from all of these other community services and state services and federal funding, that they're still going to be looking for support and those slots aren't going to be there. We've enrolled 4 families this past month, and we didn't even enroll 4 families last year. So the work that we're doing, the seeds that we planted almost 3 years ago, we're just now seeing those flowers. And we can't even be in celebration because we're on calls like this. We're in spaces like this, where it's hard to be hopeful. And so for anybody who didn't cry off mute, I don't know, I want you to know that that I'm just feeling overwhelmed with empathy and compassion and thinking about your communities and your staff and your families and your stories. And I hope that we can all continue to see each other and be in this work together through all of this. So thank you.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you for the important feedback about the letter, providing suggestions to us for future communication and sharing with us how it's impacted you and your organization. Thanks. And know that it is challenging space for us all to be in, and I'm sorry that that's impacted you in that way. I'm gonna just pause there if anyone else wants to jump in and share any thoughts at this moment before we move forward.
Hello. So this is Allison, and you might have already talked about some things, and I apologize. I was on the MI training. And some of you know I did send a letter kind of following the situation. And so I hear you, Corey. For me, I did feel the need to work our system and submit a letter from the tribe's perspective of what this looked like and felt like for us. I don't know that I'll get a response, but you know, it's a little scary to write a letter in times like this, kind of stating a DEI perspective. It just pisses me off, but you know, just from coming from that point, but we did it, and hopefully it kind of ties in to what you're saying, Corey, about how long it takes to develop something in Indian country, because there is such a history of, yeah, but will you really be here? Yeah, but what's your real motive in doing this? And so it does take a while to get started, and we are experiencing a lot of the same thing that we're getting courts and hospitals calling us now, which seems like, well, duh, but it really takes a process to get connected within the community so they feel safe in making even those referrals to us, never mind the families themselves engaging as well. And I could go on and on, Laura, but I'm going to stop myself and just say that I hope that our statements are heard and read and considered as you guys are moving in the direction. And I know Washington State is pretty committed to still having concepts of DEI. I don't know that you can even formally say you're doing or honoring DEI in this climate, but I know that it is something that you guys are really being reflective on, and I appreciate that. It's just, it still has consequences of what's happening moving forward, kind of specifically for the minority populations that a lot of this work is supposed to be targeted to. So that's all. Thank you.
Hi, I just wanted to say something. Corey, really thank you so much for talking to us. What you shared was very powerful, and it really stayed with me. And really appreciate your honesty, your kindness, and the chance that you gave us to listen to you. And the part that I want you to know is that, and you know this part, your voice is strong, and it absolutely belongs in these spaces. And I know that sometimes it can be difficult to belong to these spaces because of all the dynamics, but I want to reassure you that we belong to this, and we want you to be this part of this space.
Going back to the community risk factors, and also thank you, Corey, for your vulnerability and honesty. I'm shaking right now, and it's just really impactful. When we're looking at, I'm just thinking about our community that I'm in, Head Start in Sunnyside was closed, 400 children without services. Children's Village doesn't have a provider for the Lower Valley. I have over 100 families on the wait list that I can't serve right now. We're fully full for McVie. I have 4 TANF slots. I only have 10 GSF, which is for Indigenous families. And we would be full, and I would have those McVie spots, but there's some inconsistency sometimes in regards to service. So when I had a transition of staff with a GSF slot, I had to move those families to McVie slots because they didn't have a GSF staff. So that's impacting me. Then with TANF, we were told that only Work First families could take a TANF spot. So a family that's receiving TANF just for the child is ineligible. And so that I had to shift some families back to McVie. I would be at 100% capacity if there weren't these inconsistencies. There's not clear messaging how these slots should be filled. I think there needs more training. There needs to be a place where you can get this information easier, more accessible. I know this is the wrong time to do these complaints. It's, I'm almost a little bit nervous to do so, but it needs to be said because I would be, our Yakima Valley Farm Workers Clinic would be at 100% capacity and still have hundreds of families not served. We get referrals from DCYF, CPS. We get referrals from our, local CSO office, Children's Village. There's not enough right now. And to think that we'll have less availability just breaks my heart for the community that I've lived, in my whole life. And so it's a hard time. It's emotional. I'm right there with you, Corey. I think about all the work we've done for the Indigenous community, reestablishing those bonds, to turn around and say, maybe we don't have service, or what are we going to do with all these families if our slots are cut that we're already serving? I'd like some kind of messaging that we could have right now, some support, what we could do to inform our families, because I don't want to just shut the door on people. I can't. And I also can't expect my staff to serve 25 families. So yeah, my emotions are high. Because it's a lot. It's a lot to know that families don't have service as it is, and we're trying our best to take all these referrals and manage a waiting list and prioritize families. And it's just a lot. It's a lot right now. And I just needed to share that and get that off my chest.
Vanessa. Other thoughts? I see there's lots of chats coming in.
Hi, I'm Shaniqua. I am here on behalf of Susan Yang, working at Denise Lee Education Center. I have to hop to another meeting, so I'm going to do this very fast. We currently right now are early Head Start funded. If many of you don't know that, we are federally funded right now and currently, a nice way to say, fighting to be able to stay open. If you guys haven't really read the news or things like that, Head Start is having a little bit of a struggle with maintaining some kind of stability or consistency. And so we are currently in the process of trying to figure out how to save our program. We are currently very funded by federal, specifically our home visiting. We are very small HBSA funded, so we only have 7 slots. And then the other half is for our BSK as well. And just a thought, I also got the letter, is to just be a little mindful because we are all receiving very heavy letters, specifically us in particular. We kind of get a letter every other week from Head Start of some kind of thing that we have to fix or change or redo differently. And we also are still trying to keep our own doors open and also trying to figure out different ways that we can retain our staff. And that is meaning different kind of funding sources or having to change whole models altogether. So just saying that as if you guys have some federally funded locations that we are literally relying on those CCYF funds to at least keep 1 or 2 of our staff on site or funded.
Thanks, Shaniqua. And thanks for joining us.
Es Jimenez from El Centro de la Raza. And I just want to say a few words for Corey and for all of the programs out there that are going through this. It is great to see all the work we did together in the past couple of years to try to make funding equitable and honoring the lived experience and trying to, we didn't get there, but trying to, at least not with PAT, trying to pay equitable salaries to people who serve the families with the highest need. And sadly enough, what that means is that families or people who are already traumatized because of the systems in place can serve people who are very traumatized, because that's a way for them to save themselves, because they understand, because they've been there. And I know this is really far removed from all the decisions and all the information that you're sharing right now. And yet this is it. Like, we're human beings here. And in the end, it's all about the numbers. So I'm with you, Corey. And thanks to everyone for the work that you're doing to continue to work towards more equitable work. And we have such a long way to go, because look at what this country has done by selecting the president that we have now. It's a good time for us to reflect and think about everything else that we haven't done. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. Nellie, I'm not tracking very well against our timing and all of that. I know you said we were having a lot of space for conversation, so I'm going to ask you to help on that, but I want to make sure we still have space for others if there's others that want to jump in too.
We still have some time, Laura. Thank you.
Well, we'll hang out here for a bit to make sure that if anyone wants to jump in, that you have space to do that. I know we have folks that have come in when they can later. If you have joined in the last hour or so, I don't even know exactly what time this conversation started. We're exploring the impacts of potential reductions and having not a formal recommendations process, but a discussion about what DCUF should be considering, what this context is like for programs, what they're experiencing. And if you haven't had a chance to chat in your name and organization, and if you're a member or a guest, please do that, because we've had, I think, folks join even in the last bit too. I'm grateful for you spending time with us today. And know that there is a lot of choices that you could be making. So thank you for this conversation and your time and effort to be here.
Could I kind of go back to something that Corey mentioned about, is it possible to even ask the people that are being given this letter and reducing and possible slot reduction and all of that, if they have funds that they would willingly return that might offset? I mean, it's kind of like we acknowledge that we're down a few slots, but we are so much in a state of building right now that we have lots of slots newly filled. But so it's kind of like, how do you balance? We understand we weren't there 4 months ago, but we are there now, and we don't want those slots necessarily reduced for the next go around. But like Corey was saying, we're willing to really look at our budgets and be realistic about it as well, without it then being like, oh, well, then you obviously don't need it. You kind of feel like you're in this stuck spot by offering that, but I don't know. It's something that I've thought about as well, Corey, because often you're almost penalized if you don't spend all your money, but you're also trying to be really fiscally responsible at the same time. So, yeah.
Allison, that's a good question. And there's a couple of responses. So all of the local programs that are on the call will be scheduling time with their program specialist to explore just that. Really, what does next year look like? What do we know and what we don't know at the moment? And that is changing by the moment. And the challenge is the way the budgeting works. Even if you think about like giving back money or whatever, because we have to budget like going forward for the next 2 years, that kind of underspend, if you will, is not something that we're assuming that underspend is probably going to go away. So like the giving back money, that doesn't necessarily really help us in the moment, if that makes sense. So, I mean, it's a great question, but we will be probably doing some projections with programs. What do you think you'll be spending this year or not? That will help us to estimate what the underspend will be, but it's not like the idea of giving back or whatever. That's not something that really is resonates with how we have to do our budget planning. But we do hope that our program specialists in their conversations with you all that's where you're really saying, okay, this is where our enrollment's at right now, our staffing, maybe we have just hired or we're about to hire. That kind of information is shared to give a more full picture for the planning going forward.
Okay, got it. And then I guess one of my questions that I have asked in a couple of different settings is, why do you guys get to decide how much we pay or how much FTEs we're allotted? If we're supposed to serve so many slots, can we not just use that money that we receive? Because, you know, it's weird. You're told you get this amount, but then you don't necessarily get it unless your slots are filled. Can we not use our funding to staff the way we feel makes the most sense for our program, as long as we're serving the number of slots that you want? So if I'm going to use more, I want to have, I'm making numbers up just for making it clear. I want to serve 20 families, and in doing that, it's going to take 50 hours a week of staff time. I'm not saying this is correct numbers or anything, okay? Then can't I decide how that is spent? Why do I have to justify if it's, you know, 0.75 of a full-time employee plus 15 of admin plus this and this? Why can't I just figure out my own budget without the stipulations on the PCQ of dividing each person's roles and number of hours? I feel like I'm kind of in this situation where you're like, you're going to get reduced, but to bump those numbers up to a good level where we really want to be, it's going to take more staff time right now, because we have to do the outreach efforts. We have to be out in the community, which is not going to pay a slot, but I have to pay staff time to do those activities. But I don't have the flexibility in my budget to just decide I'm putting more money towards this just wages right now, because that's how the program will be built up. Does my question make sense to you?
Yes, and one that I don't know that I want to answer in this space, Allison, without Renee and her team here. But what I think you're doing is thinking about exploring how much flexibility you have within the budget, and I think there may be some there. So for me, what I would say is, please propose whatever you're hoping to do, or whatever you think you may be unsure if you're allowed to do with your program specialist. And I think that's Ashley. Do you have Ashley? And Renee, and they'll support you in that exploration, Allison, because like I said, I think there's a lot that you are thinking about that may be valid ideas, and I'm not 100% sure without you kind of writing them down and exploring them with Ashley. But the short answer is yes, please do be exploring what you think might work for you all, and check your assumptions about whether, or your understanding, not assumptions, your understanding whether that is, you know, has to be that way or not, because there may be more flexibility there. I'm not 100% sure. So please do follow up with Ashley and Renee on that.
I want to say thank you so much for engaging in this part and offering your perspective, your voice, seeing a variety of creative things that we are definitely going to look at and think about and explore. And again, this isn't the only time and opportunity for that. Please feel free if there are things that come up for you, both questions or other thoughts or ideas. We have our home visiting inbox. You have your program specialists. You can also feel free to reach out to Laura and I. So there's a variety of different ways that you can continue to share your thoughts, continue to share ideas, and things that we need to be looking at and thinking about and considering. So again, I just want to take an opportunity to say thank you. Thank you for the honesty. Thank you for the vulnerability. Thank you for sharing openly. I think that's the only way that we continue to figure out how we get to the ultimate destination we're all trying to arrive at. So just want to take a moment and say that. And we're gonna transition to the last part of our time together, which is our updates. We've got a few of those, and I think we'll be able to kind of end on time. And I'm hoping that we can have a little bit of time to do a little bit of a closing piece for those who are able to stay on. Thank you, Jessica, for pulling that up. All right, so this is on to you, Nina.
Thank you, Nellie. I guess I'm going to start just by taking a second to just say how I appreciate how deeply reflective the conversation was, as difficult as it was for some, and how beautifully you elevate the voices of your communities, your organizations, and your workforce. So it was a privilege to be listening to this and to hear from you today. So thank you.
Nina, you're a little bit quiet.
Oh,
a little hard to hear you.
Oh, I might still be on my headphones died, so I may be on. Let me just see.
You might just need to scoot a little bit closer to the laptop. Thanks, Nina.
Okay, thanks. Can you hear better now? Okay. Thank you. If you didn't hear the thank you before, I will go on with the report. First of all, we had a feedback session at the office hours on the upcoming, still can't hear me? Give me a second and I'll go to my.
Did this help?
Great. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Maybe I'm meant to listen and not talk is what that means. So it's a kind of universe is sending messages. We did have a feedback session on the upcoming SUD training series. And so you should receive an attachment as well of the feedback that we did receive from supervisors during the February office hours. And we will be probably sharing some more information about the training series at the upcoming All HVSA meeting. I wanted to let you know that the HVAC Workforce Subcommittee will begin meeting in odd-numbered months beginning in July, meaning the off months when there isn't a meeting. The survey will be going out this week with questions about whether or not you want to continue with the Workforce Subcommittee. And then finally, we at the June Workforce Subcommittee meeting, our June HVAC meeting, we are going to have a Workforce Subcommittee meeting to help prioritize our subcommittee activities for the new fiscal year. But we'll have 2 months in a row, the June HVAC meeting, and then we'll start up our July odd month meeting to kind of jumpstart and get back in swing in terms of the workforce work that we're doing. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Nina. Jessica, could you? So just wanted to give a quick MCV update. And I think Laura also alluded to some of this earlier, in that there have been a lot of significant changes at the federal level. We had quite a few program officers who were laid off, and it sounds like they're in the process of getting them rehired again. There were some who were let go by mistake, is what we were hearing. So we're hoping that capacity for our program officers will increase. And then there was also the creation of a new administration for Healthy America. So it consolidated a variety of different administrations into one, and centralized key functions. And so that's also been impacting our McVie staff and HRSA staff in general. So we just wanted to share this. You may have already heard it. I'm going to put a link to the fact sheet into the chat right now in case you had not seen it. And you can refer to that for additional information. We have been fortunate enough to keep our project officer, so that has been a plus, and it seems like she's going to continue for now. So we're excited about that. Next slide, please. Also, just wanted to highlight for you that April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. We had a planting of the pins earlier this month. And just here also you can order coloring books and some posters and stickers, and we can put that into the chat as well, should you want to do that. All right, so yay, we have a chair and a co-chair, and we're excited about that. We started this process, I think a couple of meetings ago. And Gretchen and Marilyn have graciously accepted to be our kind of inaugural chair and co-chair. So we're excited about that. So this slide just gives a couple of, this gives us just some information on how we're going to be structuring that. So the chair will serve a 3-year term. The co-chair will serve a 2-year term. We want to make sure that there's an opportunity for there to be some mentoring. Know that these terms officially won't start until the next state fiscal year, which will be, in after July, and we don't have dates for that as yet for our HVAC meetings, but they'll be part of that. Also wanted to take an opportunity to say thank you to all who were nominated. I had a chance to talk to each and every one of them, and there were a variety of different reasons that people opted to not be the inaugural, and all reasons that made perfect sense. So we're just happy and excited that we're going to move forward with Gretchen and with Marilyn. And so I know this is putting the two of you on the spot, but just wanted to give you an opportunity to say anything if you wanted to, and just want to again say thank you. And it's I'm excited to I'm looking forward to working with both of you much closer than we already are. So just wanted to give an opportunity really quick to Gretchen and to Marilyn.
Thanks, Nellie. Yeah, I'm just always excited to be part of this group. It's such an amazing, diverse group that works together so well and looks at the bigger picture for home visiting in our state. And obviously, we're all sad and stressed and everything else right now with everything going on, and so difficult time, but I do really have a lot of faith in this group, and moving forward and trying to find a good path that hopefully will minimize impact. And yeah, grateful to be working alongside all of you and working with Marilyn on this.
Gretchen said that really well. I'm honored to get to do this and appreciated my conversation with Nellie when we talked about it. And yeah, truly, it is a very difficult and an emotional time right now. And I often go back to a statement I think I learned in either NFP or from one of my previous directors, which is trust the process. And I do trust the integrity and the intent of this group and everyone who is so committed to the families that we serve and to our staff. So I'm really honored to get to do this. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Just wanted to, are there any questions, thoughts about the updates? Wanted to give a moment.
Nellie, I have a question. Are we are we voting on anything today, or are we doing more once the budget has been decided and there's more information?
We are going to do more. We're not doing any votes today. What we are, I'm just gonna share this, is what we are hoping to do is to pull together another meeting, and we'll send some information out once we have more around the budget and just more around where we'll be, to have something really quick centered around just what we've discovered and how we're wanting to move forward, and to just gather feedback and some input as well between now and when we meet again in June. So it's a significant break there between when we get information and when we pull together as HVAC. So we were going to just ask about that, and say, just ask if people are willing to get together in that way. And we don't know when that time frame will be. My guess will be sometime in May. But other than that, until we have kind of the final budget, we won't know when we'll be ready to do that. But projecting sometime early May, early to mid-May.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions before I just start? Any questions from our guests? So as I mentioned, just given the nature of where we are and all that we've talked about today, and the time frame between now and when our next meeting is, we're scheduled for a meeting in the middle of June. There'll be a lot that will happen between now and then. So we're looking to pull together a meeting sometime in May. So please look out for an email with that. HVAC members pulling together to share more and to talk more through kind of what we discovered and where we're headed, and to gather some input. I also just want to acknowledge that this has been a meeting with a lot of really, really heavy pieces of information, a lot of things that you may have heard or discovered for the first time, and probably a lot of thoughts, a lot of feelings, just a lot going on. And rightfully so, given all the things that we've been talking about and just the serious nature of it all. Jessica, I'm wondering if you can stop the PowerPoint. That'd be great. Thank you. So I just wanted to offer an opportunity for us to just engage in some body work before we end our meeting today. And I know there may be those who have to get off, and I completely understand that for other meetings, but I wanted to just offer that as an opportunity for those who are willing to stay on, just to do some breathing and just to connect with where we are, and as a part of transitioning on from this very kind of heavy and tough meeting into other spaces that you may be in for the rest of the day. So I will get that here prepped and ready to go. And those of you who are able to stay, that you can stay and work through this. If you need to transition, I completely understand that, and want to take an opportunity again to thank you for being here and working through this. This wasn't easy. And as I think was mentioned before, people could have been a variety of different places, but you chose to be here and to work through this. So I've a lot of appreciation for that. And after this is done, please feel free to log off. So I'm going to get this going, and you can leave your camera on, or looks like somebody just, I'm going to check in again really quick. Are there any last minute comments or questions before we transition? I see. Well, I will get things started, and again, so much appreciation for that. And once this is done, I hope that the rest of your day and the rest of your week and into your weekend goes okay. So give me just a second.
Nellie, I'm not sure if you think you're sharing, but you're not sharing on our side. There we go.